Yesterday, we saw the latest protest group, Insulate Britain, another bunch of people who apparently don't have jobs or homes to go to. We have to introduce these people to daytime telly at some point, don't we? But climate change protesters blocked 5 junctions on the M25, one of the busiest motorways in the country, of course, causing long tailbacks and disruption for motorists. Those junctions were blocked as people sat down, with signs saying, we're sorry to have to stop you. But this was Insulate Britain saying they're demanding the government insulate Britain. That was their call to arms. In the end, 42 people in total were arrested and the roads were reopened. Well, let's talk to Donnachadh McCarthy, who's a climate columnist at the Independent newspaper. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Is it really justifiable for people, just because they feel strongly about a particular issue, whether it is insulating homes or anything else, that they should be allowed to stop other people from going about their daily business on our roads?
I thought it was interesting. In a television interview last night, one of the drivers that was inconvenienced by the protest shrugged his shoulders and said, well, what else can we do to get the government to pay attention to this issue? There are 28,000 people dying excess deaths every year in Britain. There are 7 million people living in fuel poverty. And what the protest was talking about yesterday is calling on the government to restore the insulation programme for social housing. The government has cut billions from that programme over the last 5 years, and that means millions of kids, adults, are quite often making a choice between food and heating their homes. And I think that's an issue that is really important. And I think that the protest has meant that you and I are discussing it this morning when we wouldn't have otherwise.
I have to say I'm more concerned about disruption to people going about their lawful business, trying to get to their jobs, to put food on the table for their own kids and pay their own heating bills, to be honest with you. The issue is, we do have an awful lot of insulation programmes as part of all the climate change net zero malarkey. There are huge multi-billion-pound programmes, vouchers for people who own their own homes to insulate their homes. In fact, we were talking about it on the show only last week, because there's been a huge amount of waste. What a surprise in that programme. People's heating bills are going up because of subsidies to green energy. That's what's causing people not to be able to afford to heat their homes.
I totally appreciate you're an intelligent person and you're a genuine person, but there is significant misinformation in those two statements.
Okay.
Let's take the first one.
Go for it.
The voucher scheme was introduced by the government as part of the CV19 program and slashed 6 months later. It was a tiny fraction of the program that was in train in 2015. So what they did was they slashed and abolished the programs that were rolling in 2015, restored a tiny fraction of them in 2020, and then abolished it 6 months later. It's a complete mess. And there are, as you rightly say, people need to be able to pay for their heating. There are 7 million people unable to do that in Britain without actually impacting on the amount of money they've got for food. So those two issues what you said is factually correct. These programs have been cut.
Okay, but
and so therefore, we need to have them restored.
They've been cut, but there are still been billions of pounds that have been spent on this, and we still have a huge subsidies for green energy, which are on top of our heating bills and our electricity bills.
Yeah, that's the second fact. The issue over the last 10 to 15 years of investment in energy efficiency and regulations has meant a saving of around £300 per year per household in the United Kingdom. Yes, there is a tax of maybe around £90 to £110 per year on our bills. But if you take £110 from 300, you can see householders already saving. A new householder will save £600 every year because of climate change regulations on their homes. It's called investment to save. And insulation, as these protests have called, makes total sense. If we can cut heating bills by a third for households across Britain, it cuts deaths from cold, it cuts heating bills, and thirdly, it cuts the amount of gas that we have to import from abroad. Win, win, win.
I've seen some rather different figures from that, but annoyingly, I don't have them right in front of me. But Donnachadh, that suffice to say, there are very much two views on that point. But let's go back to the issue.
Two views on which point?
Let's on whether the green energy is costing us more money or saving us money. Donnachadh, I'm really tight on time. Donnachadh, I'm tight on time. I want to come back to the issue of what people could do. You could say we're only talking about this because of these protests. Okay, well, fair enough. But does that actually bring anyone round to your way of thinking because they've been stopped in traffic? And is it ever justified when a protest incidentally, when there's a march, incidentally stops people going about that business? Then, there's a right of protest in this country. In a democracy, it's an important thing. When the protest is aimed specifically at stopping other people from going about their lawful business, I've got a very big issue with it. Whether it's whether it's the Extinction Rebellion, whether it's this group Insulate Britain. Who the hell do they think they are? How dare they think that they could impose their views on other people? Don't you understand why a lot of people are very angered by this?
I can understand anybody who's delayed by a protest, whether it's anti-vaxxers, whether it's Brexit people, whether it's Remain people, whether it's Unity people. I understand when roads are blocked by protests that people get disrupted.
I'm sorry. All of those, no, not the anti-vaxxers. Some of those have been deliberately disruptive and quite violent, and really, I'm not, absolutely appalled by those. All the other things, when there's a Remain march or a Brexit march or an anti-lockdown march, these are people who are going on a march. They're legally allowed to do so. They keep moving, and roads get blocked while the period of the march. That's very different from people deliberately sitting down to stop people driving their cars or their vans or their lorries to get to the place of work. That's a very different kind of protest.
Yeah, I accept that, but I would also argue that when you get to a situation where you and I disagree about the urgency of the crisis, but from their point of view, we disagree. But if you take point of view that you accept what the IPCC says, that we're now all facing extreme weather. I've had torrential rainfall on my house this morning.
Oh gosh, I've never had weather before.
I live in a low part of London. So I have been looking at what's happening in Germany, and I now have to say, according to IPCC, we will be facing extreme weather threats for the rest of our lives because of climate crisis. We need to be taking action now. Okay. No, come on, there was a 7-meter wall of water.
Darling, I'm having my kitchen ripped out in my basement because I got flooded. It's nothing to do with climate change. I'm sorry, and I'm a victim of it. Apparently, I'm going to have to leave it there because time is completely against me. And I've got to get the sport in. Donnachadh McCarthy, climate columnist at The Independent. It's 7:44. Is the time. I love that every aspect of weather now is evidence of climate change. Sun, drought, rain, wind, everything.